compulsive gamblers in outpatient treatment setting. And he suggests that the spouse, partner, or parent should be at the initial appointment. We do suggest that. However, we don't interview the gambler together with the spouse. We interview the gambler, then the spouse. We give the spouse a questionnaire that the spouse fills out while in the waiting room. And then after we have done the assessment, which can take 1.5 to 2 hours, then we bring in the spouse or the partner. The reason for not bringing the spouse or partner in right away, is because sometimes the gambler has a very abusive spouse. Particularly female gamblers may have a physically abusive husband or partner. And to bring that partner into that first session can actually be dangerous for the gambler. So we don't do it. We talk to the gambler, then we bring the spouse in, and just let the spouse speak, and not tell the spouse anything that the gambler has told us. Just let the spouse speak there. It can provide, knowing that, you can help create an alliance with the gambler. If you know that if the gambler knows that you're not going to communicate things to the partner if the partner is abusive, and it supports, in any of the case, it supports the partner in whatever they're going to do. Obviously, we discuss confidentiality. The first thing before I do anything else, I discuss confidentiality. And I also look for self-oriented questions rather than external reasons. Rather how painful it has been to them, how anxious they've been about the debts, how depressed they've been feeling, how sad they've been feeling. Basically self-oriented, ideally feelings-oriented statements. We get a brief gambling history, and we use the addiction severity index after. But first of all, we use what I do is I list all the types of gambling that are listed in the Southwest gambling screen, and go over each one, asking them when did they first gamble on that? When did gambling ever become a problem on that form of gambling? And what is their current form of gambling now? Try to get a history of each type of gambling. It is not unusual, for example, for somebody to say, well, I played horses, I was a horse bettor when I was in my 20s and 30s, from age 20 to, say, 35, but I stopped playing horses. And now my problem is slot machines. So we try to get some idea, okay, did they develop a problem with horse race gambling before? Or, why did they stop? Get some idea of that. Then also get an idea of their whether they're playing the lottery, whether they go to bingo, and just when they started, who introduced, how they got introduced, and then see the fairly non-threatening questions, just to get an idea of the amount of gambling that they've been doing. And we'll do that, and I'll go over the Southwest gambling screen questions as well, and I also get some estimate of we use the question that they brought in, get some idea of the financial problems as they see them right now, and go through each form of borrowing in the initial assessment. Also find out whether they have any legal problems or experience with the criminal justice system. What their occupational history has been. I often will have a list of occupations that may be 10 or 20 different occupations. I will try to list them all. They may or may not be able to tell me when they were employed in those jobs. But if they're not depressed, if they're not highly anxious, then they will be able to give me a fairly good list of jobs. And that starts, and I also get an educational history, whether they've been in special education, or did they have reading problems in school, to get some sense for what their level, maybe their level of reading is in that first session. Then I'm going to learn about, we divide and talk about also alcohol and drug problems. We're also talking about alcohol and drug problems and using the Addiction Severity Index, which is not on the slide. The Addiction Severity Index basically assesses the individuals for medical problems. We go through a full medical history. I'm not an MD, so I'm not going to get a full medical history. I'm going to get whatever they're reporting to me. We ask them to bring a list of their prescriptions, their medications. And I definitely want to know when their last dental exam was and when their last physical exam was. Because many gamblers don't go to the dentist, they don't go to the doctor in the United States because they can't afford the copay, or because they have no insurance, or maybe they had a lump and they're afraid they've had it for 3 years and they've been afraid to have it checked out. And that's one of the reasons. That's one of the things that's been driving their gambling. We make sure that they get a physical exam. We also go through their occupational history, find out whether they've had trouble keeping jobs. Their residential history. How good is their housing? Is their housing adequate? Some people come in, they're homeless, and they're panhandling. They're going from person to person asking for money, and then they take the money and they buy a scratch ticket with it, or they take the money and they go to the racetrack and play the machines with it. We're also asking about their family, some idea of their family background, and what their early family life was like, and what their current family life was like. It's like just a brief history of marriages and divorces. And I create a genogram, a picture of the family, with circles and squares. The circles are for females, squares are for males. Marriages are recorded, the ages of each person, of their spouse, themselves, their spouse, their children, their parents, their brothers and sisters, their grandparents, important other relatives, and important friends. Also asking about previous attempts to deal with gambling. Have they had a history of abstinence and relapse? Abstinence and relapse. Have they tried to quit gambling? Maybe successful. What's the longest period they've stopped? Some people have stopped for a year. What started them again? If they're married and they have stopped and started, now I know that the issue of trust in that relationship, they have a partner or they're married, the trust in that relationship is severely damaged. So we're looking at that as well. We also ask them whether they've been to Gamblers Anonymous and whether they have been to treatment before. Some people, yes, I've been to Gamblers Anonymous. I tried it. I didn't like it. Oh, okay. When did you go? Oh, I went 8 years ago. How many meetings? 1. Okay. How heavily were you? Well, I went because my husband told me I had to go. No wonder you didn't like it. So we may or may not, depending on the person's receptivity, I may suggest or not suggest going to 2 Gamblers Anonymous meetings a week. Where I live, there are 9 Gamblers Anonymous meetings a week within a 20-minute drive. We also, obviously, we're using the Southwest Gambling Screen, the Gamblers Anonymous 20 questions, and the DSM-4. And something called the Custer chart. Robert Custer had this chart that basically had winning phase, losing phase, desperation phase, and then it had different phases of recovery on it, the chart. And I couldn't scan it on to the computer. And there's no confrontation. Yes?
Moore, who was Moore? What has he written?
Charles Maurer. Charles Maurer. He was the president of the National Council on Problem Gambling. And he wrote an article in the Journal of Gambling Behavior in, I think, 1986 or 87.
Which you are referring to?
Partially I'm referring to, but also I'm telling you, the things that we add to it. We do not confront the gambler at all. We try to get the gambler where they are at. If they don't think they have a gambling problem, that's fine. If they think they only have a problem with horses but not with the slot machines, that's okay. No confrontation at all at first session. We also introduced a turtle. Every person in that first session gets a plastic turtle, this big, that they can put in their pocket. Sometimes they put them on the slot machine. I can't help that. Plastic turtle, they keep it, and it reminds them to slow down. It reminds them, we tell them, here's a turtle. Between now and the next time we meet, I would like you to if you go to 2 Gamblers Anonymous meetings, if you want to do that, come and if you have a desire to gamble, think of the turtle, give yourself 15 minutes to think about what you are about to do and what has the impact been on your life. For 15 minutes. Don't think short term. Don't think today. Think about the bigger picture. Think. Do something turtles do not do. Think. Think of the possible negative consequences of what you are about to do. And also think about alternative things you can do. Many people, they say, I don't know what I will do if I can't play the machine. There's no place to go. They have no idea. They have been playing the machines for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Or maybe only 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. But they still don't know what to do if they don't play the machines. And then if that fails, give yourself another 15 minutes. Don't think a day at a time, think 15 minutes at a time. A day at a time is too long. 15 minutes at a time. The cravings will gradually go away. Charles Maurer suggests that there are 3 types of patients. The first type says, it is a problem I can lick on my own. I can do it myself. At that point, I move into a motivational interviewing style. I try to get them to understand just feedback. Just reflecting back what they're saying and trying to get them involved. Second category, I want help with my problems, my gambling problem, but nothing else. In some practices, that's the most common response. That is, for us, that is not the most common response. Often, when people come in, they say, I need help for my gambling. And then, I've been very depressed. I'm nervous all the time. I have bad dreams. They often, many individuals will not just talk about gambling in that first session. They'll talk about other problems that they have. And then they become surprised later on when, if they want, we address those problems. When some, they have been in therapy before and would like those problems addressed again. Because now they're depressed again and they're gambling again, and maybe the depression came before the gambling. And Maurer says, basically feel their pain. Empathize with them. Empathize by feedback, getting them to know that you are trying to understand what they're saying. Maurer has a second assessment visit. We do this on this first visit because there may never be a second visit. So we do this on the first visit. We assess their alcohol and drug use. If they're lying, they're lying. Nothing we can do about it. And we assess need for medication. Some people come in. Not too often. Periodically, we get people who are schizophrenic, unmedicated. People with bipolar disorder, unmedicated. If they're depressed, we typically do not make a referral for medication right away. So often the depression is just gambling related, but we'll wait. Depending on how severity of depression. If depression is quite severe, we automatically refer to a psychiatrist for possible medication. And we might educate them about, the depression might go away if you stop gambling. It's a possibility that the gambling is making you depressed. And in many cases it does. It goes away. Then also tell them that some people go into depression when they withdraw, and that's normal. They don't understand that when they're feeling depressed, sometimes it's because they haven't gambled. And they're lonely, there's nothing in their life, they're back on their own resources, and their resources are very poor. Then we get into differential diagnosis issues. Now, differential diagnosis, the only one that's really important is manic episode. Did they gamble just during a manic episode? And I have never come across a person that gambled just in a manic episode with a gambling problem, even though it's possible. And I will, obviously, I'm assessing for suicidal and homicidal ideation right away, that first session. Now, see, Maurer had the luxury of being able to refer. I will make a hospital referral if they need a detox. I'll refer them to a detox, an alcohol detoxification program, and I will refer them for inpatient if they're obviously floridly suicidal or floridly manic. And they may be confused, tangential. That may be because of the problems that they're experiencing with their gambling. All the stress that's coming on is producing thought disorder. And if that's the only problem, I'll wait. Sometimes I'll wait for the second session, and then I'll refer if that continues. Maurer, I said, what we'll do is we'll refer them to an inpatient treatment program if they need a safe environment to avoid illegal acts. Well, that's pie in the sky, because there are no inpatient treatment programs for gamblers anywhere around me. It's not possible. The only inpatient treatment programs available for gamblers are in the Veterans Administration Hospital, or you're 1,000 miles away. And without patient treatment failures, we have one option. We send them to another treatment program, whatever. Or, Gamblers Anonymous if they haven't been. But if they've been out, if they're outpatient treatment failures in our facility, then I'm going to start looking for personality issues. All right. Again, going back to what I often flip back and forth. I apologize. Assessing for vocational needs. We're looking for marital problems. And definitely I'm going to see the spouse or partner ideally after this first session or at a session later on. And like I said, I'm going to assess for the last dental or physical exam. The stress-related diseases, cardiovascular disorders, and gastrointestinal or stomach problems are quite common among gamblers. What issues do you avoid early on in treatment? Well, early life issues. I only ask them to tell me what their early childhood was about. That's all. I don't probe. Except for, have you ever been emotionally, physically, or sexually abused? And that's the only question. We're asking those questions. I'm not saying, have you ever been sexually abused? I'm going to ask, in a different way. But I am not going to probe that and go into that early in treatment. I'm not going to go into trauma early in treatment. Because if you raise the trauma, the desire to gamble accelerates to escape from the memory, from the flashbacks or whatever they're having. Avoid childhood issues and avoid harm they may have given to their children. Stolen from a child's savings account. Abandoning the child when they went to gamble. For example, one patient left her a 12-year-old son at home for 2 days when she went to a casino in another city. Just left him. Now that was child abuse. That was child neglect. I'm a mandated reporter. I had to report it. I had to report that. And that ended the treatment. But I had to report it. But I also tell them that, that's part of the confidentiality rules that I explained in the beginning. And I also avoid financial issues. They come to me the first session and they say, how can I get the money? And I say, tremendous financial problems. I will deal with that, but not today. We'll deal with that, in a few weeks. I promise you we'll deal with it. This issue can be resolved in one way or another. We'll deal with it. Try to get them to understand that things are possible. Okay. Now it's your turn. It is your turn to answer some questions for me. Were there any signs of problem gambling that I missed in the discussion? Any signs of problem gambling? I know I missed many. That you see, that you've had people talk to you about. Maybe you can ask the question in Norwegian. Answer the question in Norwegian, and someone could translate. Hans, do you have any questions? Okay, the second question, what signs of problem gambling that I discussed did not seem to be present in Norway?
Instant tickets.
Instant
That's an
tickets.
addiction problem. We don't see it.
No instant tickets. You have instant tickets?
Yes, but we don't see people addicted to it.
Is the same sign on the scratch tickets as you see on the machines? Call your toll-free helpline number. Is it on the back of the scratch ticket?
He's the boss of the helpline.
It's very seldom that we have any who are calling for these scratch tickets. It's the slot machines that's the main
Yes.
problem. But very seldom.
But often the reason why people are not referred is because if they have a problem with scratch tickets, they don't know there's help because they've never seen the machines. So the warning, the helpline number is not on the scratch tickets right now. Not in the back. I would suggest that be done because it is on ours, and we do get scratch ticket players. In fact, that's the second most addicting form of gambling. After the slot machines, the scratch tickets are the second most addicting. In the United States. I will qualify that. With our treatment population, even small, yes.
Some of us have the theory that because of the extreme availability of slot machines in Norway,
Yes.
those people who might have been disposed of problems with scratch tickets all go to slot machines because they are everywhere. You can
Right.
avoid them.
Right. Okay, that may be the case. Right. That's because we have limited availability of slot machines and wide availability of scratch tickets. All the convenience stores have scratch tickets. So you have mini casinos, small casinos, all over the state. Every place that sells milk and bread.
You didn't get an answer to your question. Is there picture of slot machines on the scratch tickets in Norway? I don't know, I don't buy that many.
No, not hear anything back.
Okay.
Er det bilder av automater på skraperne? Nei. No.
Okay. Are there signs of problem gambling that are unique to Norway? No? This is a question that Mark Dickerson has noticed, and so the people in Australia in particular. They do not like the medical model. They do not like the diagnostic and statistical category pathological gambling. They say that gamblers exist along a continuum. I believe that as well. Gamblers do exist along a continuum. You have some people with no problem, and that represent most people. And you have some people who have severe problems, very small percentage of the population. But that curve goes down like this, down like this, and there's no bump. There's no bump at the end. To say, well, this is a cluster, a group of people who are pathological gamblers. There's a bump. What you have is a gradual slide of increase. And two ways to interpret that. Do this. Something like that. And you don't have anything like this.
Følger alle vanntegner? Samme som for alt og de fleste andre har.
So this would say, this is dimensional. This would say, there's a category here. Is the medical model an appropriate model? Anyone raise that question here? Are we dealing with learned behavior? It's all cognitive distortions, for example, that are learned. Or we're dealing with operant conditioning. People are conditioned with the wins and losses, and it's all psychological, and there's no medical chemical. They argue that this model, a dimensional model, applies rather than a categorical model. Are you satisfied with the diagnostic criteria? You think it is. Does anybody here not think that does anyone say that the diagnostic criteria are not satisfactory? They do not use them. All of you are using them. Okay. And the question is, if there are changes, I can suggest some changes in the criteria. One of the changes I would suggest in the criteria is the way that tolerance is worded. Because tolerance may not be just for excitement, and it's not just increasing the amount of money, but also the frequency of play, also the speed of play, increasing the frequency and speed of play and number of events played within a certain time period may be involved in tolerance, and not just increase in time and money spent, I think it is, in the criteria. And Alex Blazinski from Australia doesn't like the criteria at all. He would take it out. He would just focus on loss of control.
But how does he measure that? But how does he measure that?
Loss of control? Oh, there is I don't think it's in that booklet. This. Where is that? The scale of gambling choices. That's what he would use. Scale of gambling choices. Which, when you look at it, is not as good as the Southwest Gambling Scale. I'm biased. But it's useful. It may be useful for research purposes. I only reviewed some of the costs of problem with pathological gambling. I did not review them all.
It's all to put these gamblers. To put it
On the agenda.
Yeah, to put it on the agenda. It's more goodwill in the society for the gamblers, and I think it's even more difficult to go in and interrupt the family structure in a way. It's more easy to go in a drug abuse family to interrupt something.
It's not impossible with the gambler, especially if the gambler has left the child in the parking lot in a casino. I was last summer, I went to a concert at one of the casinos, and I parked my car, and there was a car right next to mine. There was an 8-year-old girl, a 4-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old in the car alone. No parents. I called security. I contacted security, and when we came back after the concert, the car was still there. There were no children in the car. I don't know what they did with the children in the car. But that happens. People who work in security in large casinos see it happen far more often than is reported to the newspapers. Yes?
She's leading a self-help group for the relatives of pathological gamblers and expresses the wish that the relatives are taken more care of by the treatment community.
In our treatment program, we have we bring in the partner and the spouse, and they will receive separate individual therapy. Often they have depression. Some are suicidal. They have depression. They'll experience anxiety because of the gambling. But the biggest problem is lack of trust. And when the spouse comes in, when a spouse calls and says her husband doesn't want to come into treatment, we say, "I want to see you." The spouse comes in. I will see the spouse, or the Bob Breen, the other psychologist, will see the spouse for 2 or 3 sessions, and then get the spouse to invite the gambler to come in. And in that situation, the spouse and the gamblers are treated together. I don't see the gambler unless I also see the spouse in that situation. The gambler and the spouse see. If the spouse is bringing the gambler in, that means that the gambler often does not want to come in. Doesn't think that the problem is all that serious. So part of my job in that session is to get the gambler to understand how serious the problem really is. For example, I had one spouse, well, I have a couple I'm seeing now. He said, well, the problem isn't all that bad. It turns out that he has $40,000 in debt. His problem wasn't that bad. And he was retiring. And his wife was afraid that when they retired, that she would not be able to retire, because she would have to pay the bills. Could you translate, please?
Altså viktigheten med det med å være pårørende, så alle det handler om å ta oss mer inn og høre på oss og ta oss området rundt oss.
That all therapists should take them in and take them seriously.
Okay. Last question, I think, is a very important comment that I have. And that is, what percentage of all the money being spent on the slot machines in Norway is being spent by problem gamblers? A very important question. The question has serious measurement issues. But given the serious measurement issues, the different studies that have been done, what I show that the percentage of money is very high. I did the first study, and all I did was I looked at how much people said that they spent on gambling in the last month. I looked at gamblers and compared them with non-problem gamblers. And added up all the money that all these people said they spent, and took the amount of money that the gamblers said they spent, and divided that by the total. And for slot machines, only the rate, the percentage varies from one to another. But for slot machines, it was 47%. I thought that was an error. Rachel Volberg criticized my calculations, and she used problem gamblers and came up with 27%. In Nova Scotia, they did a study. They surveyed several thousand slot machine players. And 16% of the regular slot machine players, these were problem gamblers using the definitions that they used, spent 53% of all the money, more than half of the money. In Australia, they used the Southwest gambling screen, a past year version, I think, or 6-month version. 42% of problem gamblers, these are people with Southwest gambling screen scores of 5 or higher, 42% of the money came from problem gamblers. The people with the Southwest gambling screen score of 10 or higher, 1/3 of all the money spent in the machines came from problem gamblers. Australia and Nova Scotia are close models for Norway, not these other states, because this included states where the slot machines were only in places like racetracks. This is standalone slot machines in both these areas. Frequent players are spending an incredible amount of money. So, what is it, the Red Cross? If the people in the Red Cross knew that almost half of the money they receive comes from problem gamblers, would they tell you, half my salary comes from problem gamblers? Would they tell you that? No, they wouldn't. And it's possible that maybe it's only 1/3. Maybe it's only 25%. Maybe it's only 10%. I'll even take 10%. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And that's a very important social policy issue. Yes?
These figures are very high if you present them to politicians. Do they believe?
The politicians do not believe them. I have presented this data to the politicians in Rhode Island, and they went from 1,500 machines at one facility to 2,500 machines, and added no more money for treatment. They don't want, because revenue. The state is making an enormous. They say, well, we'd have to raise taxes. I say, raise taxes.
And then they are not re-elected.
Maybe people would rather have someone else